right, and now it's time for our Dame Luz section, the WAP Spot, Women Aligning Power. Let's talk about sex, whether it's getting the tea, learning something new, or a random question that I'm pondering about. Now, as you know, Cato, I am a very proud Bronx native. And the reason I'm proud of the Bronx is because it really shaped so many of my worldviews, many of them which have made me stronger, and many of them which gave me something to go out in the world and unlearn and like have an emotionally corrective experience to learn something new with. And I feel like sex, and especially being a cis woman in the Bronx, growing up, like I graduated from middle school in 2005. And I say middle school because that was like the time frame where like I have friends who had gotten pregnant and like talk about abortion, right? Like access to these sorts of services. And so my worldview around sex really started to crack open like in fifth grade, which for my God, that's so young. Well, welcome to the Bronx, right? So
That's you're not even lying. Like it's so true. It's so true. Like I remember being in eighth grade, and at least in eighth grade, I mean, like each eighth grade class had one pregnant girl.
yeah. And people think you be lying. And it's like, no, there were
No,
like two different girls who were like pregnant or like by the time I was in eighth grade.
yeah.
And
Hmm.
when I was in the younger grades, right, then like girls who were like older in older grades, and it was something of a shock, but also I think that it was a product of not girls being too fast, or as they used to say, hot twats, not because they was hot twats, right, but also because there wasn't really a deep enough access, I think, to sex education across the spectrum. And even when there were certain little programs, like for example, in my middle school, there was an after school program called Children's Aid Society. Shout out to Children's Aid, right? Like they brought in a sex educator into the school. There was nothing
That's
that was
good.
curriculum that was going to prepare us for what we were already ready to engage in. And while I
Hmm.
had sex in middle school, for anybody who's listening, who's in my family, espérate, porque, okay, I would talk about this, but I was not opening my legs back then because I grew up in a household where, it was like
Right.
clothes because you can't bring no babies up in here. And I listened, right? There was always like there was just like a culture of what sex was during that time and even throughout high school. And so yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more about like what that culture was for you growing up. What was affirmed for you, what was denied, what were you miseducated in, but also how has your relationship with that evolved now that you've grown and you know how to handle yourself.
This is such a great question, great topic. So, I mean, similar to you, you know, um, I feel like girls in the Bronx, we were sexualized at young ages. Whether it was the catcalling from the guys in the corner or, older men in the neighborhood or like even like older guys in school, like, the upperclassmen just kind of preying on the younger girls. I just feel like that was so prevalent back then when I was growing up. Like I remember like, being in middle school and like, walking with my friends and like, just guys on the corner who were obviously way older than us, like, hissing at us, like, like saying shit like, oye, mami, que linda, or like, and if you didn't respond, well, fuck you then, bitch, shit like or or baby in the black got back. I remember one time that happened to me. I had on black pants, and I will never forget that. And I was like, baby in the black got back. It took me a while to understand what he was saying. And I was like, back, my back. And I was like, oh, my back, my butt. And I'm just like, why is a grown ass man checking out my butt? I'm 12. So I kind of feel like I don't know how prevalent that is anymore. I just feel like it's always gonna be prevalent, but I just feel like there was a time where it was just when I was younger, it was just like it was just more out there. Like that, no, like it was kind of like it went unchecked
Yes. Yeah.
in a way that it doesn't happen now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the younger, like, I have a niece who's 16 years old and one who is 10, but is already developing. Right. And so, like,
Mm,
I see though the difference in which how they know to carry themselves. And maybe that is because of the exposure to more storytelling around teen pregnancy or things like that
right.
16-year-old niece watched Euphoria, for example. Not that that show's about pregnancy, but just like
Mm-hmm.
kids in the day and age where like things are really hot and real. And not that we didn't have those things at all, but like to say that you watched Degrassi was to say that you had cable, and not everybody had cable, and or if they had cable, they didn't have money for the extra channels. So our access to some of these things was really limited to the scope of where we were. And the internet, I think, is just such a
I was
broad.
just gonna say that.
Yeah, yeah, we didn't have that, and for us,
Yeah,
we were pioneers. Like all of the guardrails and things that are in place now, or maybe aren't in place, but because they're not in place, parents know to prevent. We were the generation that stumbled through that, you know what I mean? And we're in the chat rooms, and I remember that there were girls in my community who would meet up with guys who they met in chat rooms. I think even our indulgence of sex in a way that was maybe irresponsible and led to things like teen pregnancy was just because nobody about it. And you got all these layers. I think about the different communities, whether it's the African American community or the Latinx community, and the taboo around sex and the religious veil that exists for some people around sex. And so there is just so many limitations that did not allow for an evolution. And so there is this like stigmatization that I think is one
mm,
thing. Can't talk about it in your community, but then you also can't talk about what the healthy ways to engage in these things look like. And I'm not even talking about condoms, right, or like have practicing safe sex from a sexual health standpoint. I'm talking about mental health. I'm talking about what does consent look like, right? How do you
consent.
navigate these spaces? But like, what are the spaces where we can have these corrective conversations to set us up for the future? Because my early 20s sexual life was very stumbly, and there was a lot of things that happened that should have not happened, and things that I permissed that I didn't want to really permiss, but I wasn't sure how to navigate it. I didn't know what it meant to be sexy and still hold power to what I did or did not want to have happen, which is not to say sexual assault, right? Because there were things that were consensual, but that
Right.
I was asking myself first, what do I actually want to consent to before consenting to a lot of things that happened, right? So there's these nuances that existed, and I don't think that the social climate in our community really set us up. And this is not exclusive to the Bronx, because I don't want to make it seem like, oh, the Bronx is the
It's
land where
not. It's not. It's not. But in the Bronx, yeah. But in the Bronx, like I feel like in the Bronx, it just went way more unchecked.
yeah, yeah, 100%. So what?
It was a cold like it was a common occurrence for like a young girl to be taken advantage of by an older guy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
and
I'm
it'd be
pretty
her.
sure that happened in Brooklyn too, probably, like
Yeah, I was gonna say Brooklyn ain't. If we first, Brooklyn is a close second, and Harlem
hmm
ain't
Harlem,
behind.
like no, Harlem's right there. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah,
right in a way where it's like now, especially with like so much crackdown on like pedophilia today.
yeah,
It wasn't
yeah.
like that back then.
Hmm.
Not when I was growing up. You know what I'm saying? Like pedophiles got away with a lot of fucking shit.
Yep, yep. And
They
do.
weren't getting cracked down on the way they are today.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely a different climate. And again, as somebody who has two nieces who are young, but really I think about the 16-year-old, and like I just hope that she knows. And I don't know that she listens to this stuff, but if you are listening, I hope that that there are women in your life who are prepared to have these conversations and hold space, because there are better ways to approach things. When something don't feel right, like you do not have to subject yourself to it. Or if something feels really right and you're excited but you don't really know what you're doing, it does not hurt to pause and take a moment and consider what's happening and ask for guidance. Like ask for guidance. And I might not be,
Yeah.
but like there are people here, because especially as people who have gone through this, whether you're male, female, non-binary, right, like there's the universal thing about sex for me is consent and pleasure, and understanding what the intersection of consent and pleasure is, and also outcome, right? Because there's consent for every action, there's a reaction. So then that's where things like condoms come in. So like really thinking about it is not lame. It doesn't kill the moment. It actually allows for you to have more authority in the moment that you want to engage in. And so yeah, that's my words of wisdom for whoever is out here in these Bronx streets still feeling vulnerable, because my evolution taught me that. Like I
Yeah.
gotta, yeah,
Yeah. I think my advice. for those still for the people, for the young people still out in the Bronx, in them Bronx streets, I would say check up on your friends. Like if you see a friend going down a wrong path, or if you see your friend and it looks like she looks uncomfortable, or if you see your friend and it looks like she's not sure what to do, or she's not well versed in this area, and it seems like someone's trying to take advantage of her, or like we got to check in with our friends. We got to say something, like some because like not everyone is so not all young people are like they feel ready to like go to an adult right away, and that's totally fine if they want to confide in their peers, but then confide in your peers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
be open about it with your peers then, there's a way, like I want to say, like there's a way that you can embrace sex positivity and also safety.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. You can embrace sex positivity and safety all in once. And that is really at the core of having a really awesome sexual evolution, right?
Yeah,
Because
because you know
that's
what, we got hormones, and things are feeling different, and we're feeling experimental, and there's ways that we can engage in like in many activities, right? It's not just like sex is experienced in so many ways, right? But like how can we still engage in what our body wants to do and feel positive, and not feel shamed for it, like you shouldn't feel ashamed because you want to masturbate. You shouldn't feel ashamed because you really want to kiss somebody, but how do you do it safely? Like because the mouth got a lot of germs in it.
baby. Okay. Okay.
Can't
Let's
be out
talk about
here kissing everybody. Can't be out here kissing everyone. Like just because kissing is not penetration, don't mean that it's safe.
you could even transmit cavities like that. You know, when I learned that, that changed my whole fucking life. I didn't have
Yeah,
man long. Then I had a little boyfriend when I was 19 years old and whatever. A couple of years later, I'm like, damn, I got cavities, but my teeth routine hasn't changed. I'm not big on candy. And then the dentist said in passing, like, oh, well, if you kissed a boy who had a lot of cavities, you might have caught it that way. And don't you know that little amiguito I had, he had mad cavities and
see what
braces
I'm
and shit.
saying?
I was like, oh hell no, not orally transmitted fucking
For
cavities.
real. People get that herpes shit. Like we went to the same high school, right? And high school was different around sex. It was very sex positive at LaGuardia.
It was very sex positive. Yeah. Yeah.
It was very sex positive. It was very like experimental. LaGuardia was fun.
Yeah. 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 You know, I almost wish that we would have actually had that conversation as well, because that world, I mean, well, to say the transformation of what I had in my evolution of sex, I think the biggest shift once I left the Bronx was LaGuardia and landing in
Yeah.
this with people of way more cultures than what I was
Yep.
experiencing were from coming together, and there were all of these different views. And in elementary school and middle school, while I'm sure they were queer people, there were none that were out of the closet that I had.
Right.
Wasn't until high school that I actually was able to be around people of all different sexual orientations and having to learn about sex from
Yes.
whole, 360, which was awesome,
Yes.
a lot. Yeah.
Yes. Big ups to LaGuardia. Shout out to LaGuardia. Because you know what? Because we did take health class. We did take sex ed. And it was at LaGuardia that I really came into terms with my queer identity.
Yeah. LaGuardia really, like, everybody was like, if you were active, everybody was sucking and fucking each other. If you weren't active, though, you were finding your expression. You were playing with the
Right.
wardrobe. You were like, it just like that.
You
And
were fucking with gender, like mhm.
so many ways that was just really powerful. And I'm always very grateful for my LaGuardia experience, especially
Me
because I was a drug
too.
dealer, so I was running around in the basement doing all types of stuff. But just the witnessing taught me so much. It was powerful. Yeah, it was very, very powerful. Thank you so much, Cato, for your loose in this conversation.
Thank you for having me, my friend.